Hi, my name is Andy Malley, and this is Glimmer DSL for SWT tutorial number 7. So last time we went through hello label. Today we're going to go through something else that is slightly related, hello text. So usually whenever you let users enter data into forms, you need labels and text. So today's example is going to show you the use of labels as well as the text widget. One other thing that we're going to cover today that is extremely important is actually data binding. This is the first tutorial that will officially get into the details of what bidirectional data binding is. So let's get started by launching the sample. So as you can see, hello text lists a whole bunch of labels on the left side and text widgets on the right side. And it's a sort of a form, as you can see. When you construct a text by default, meaning this widget over here that lets you enter data or text, you'll see that it actually has a border. So usually text will have a border style by default. This is the equivalent of you passing a border style into the text widget. So to explain what I'm talking about, if I were to close this and go into the first one and go into here and then type border as a symbol, this basically is passing the SWT style of border into text, the text widget, and then I launch it. You're going to see a border around it. And this is just like the default. So, I don't have to enter any of that. I could just delete it and launch it again, and it's the same. So this is the default style of text, and this is an example of Glimmer giving you defaults, smart defaults for widgets. Another thing to notice is that the text of the text widget is data bound bidirectionally into the default variable on the self object. So that means that when we type text here or delete text, it ends up getting stored into this default attribute. And by default, no pun intended, we're going to set it to default is border style. And that's the text that we saw initially. However, if I were to close this and relaunch it one more time, you can see default is border style. But if I were to delete some of the text, this will get persisted into that variable. And we're going to see an example better demonstrating that a bit later. But keep this in mind for now, that whatever changes happen to this text widget are happening bidirectionally. So either first, it basically reads the default variable value into the text widget, text property. And then if I were to change it, that triggers the opposite direction of the data binding, and it basically persists whatever coming from the text property into the default variable. So let's go through a few other examples. So the next text widget has a style of none. If it has a style of none, it's got no border, as you can see over here. The next one has styles of center and border. So it does have a border, but it's also centered. This one is left aligned. This one is right aligned. This one has a style of password. And so basically any text you enter will end up getting masked, so people cannot see what I typed in as a password. Now things get interesting with the next one, which is read only. So telephone area code is 555. This one is read only, meaning if I click on it, I cannot change it. I cannot type anything and change it. However, the telephone area code 555 has been read from the next text widget, which is text with event handlers. So this one is actually a text widget that filters the formatting of the text that is entered, and that means I can only enter a number. So if I were to delete this and try to type in some characters that are not numbers, nothing will happen. But if I were to type in a number, for example, 514-933-7263, you can see immediately that the previous widget, text widget, now says telephone area code is 514. And that is because of data binding. It automatically was able to read the value from the next text widget using data binding. So let's look into the code. I'm going to drag this to the right side and scroll the code a little bit. And as you can see, this is the text widget that has a read-only style. And notice that the arrow here is not a double arrow. It's a single arrow pointing to the left side. What that means is this is a read-only data binding, meaning it's a unidirectional data binding. not bidirectional. So meaning any changes that happen to the read-only attribute on self will get propagated to the text property on text. However, if you go to the next text widget, this one has standard bidirectional data binding, meaning any changes on that text widget will get propagated to the attribute of telephone, and any changes in telephone will get propagated to the attribute, the property, the text property on the text widget. The more interesting part is the listeners. So if you were to look at the listeners, let me drag this a bit higher. So you can see we have an unverified text listener, and here it says this event kicks in just after the user typed and before modifying the text attribute value. So that means that when I click on this text and say I delete and I try to type in a character, it'll trigger this unverified text, and it'll basically grab the text from the widget of the verify event, and it will basically say here do it, and it sets it to whether it's a telephone or not. So if I type in text that is a character that is not a number, it will not accept it, so nothing happens. But if I type in 8 here, for example, this entire text will get compared using the telephone method, and it'll be true. So then the verify event do it value becomes true, which will enable the text widget to then make the change happen. The next listener that fires after that is unmodified text. This happens after something got verified correctly. So as you can see, it says this event kicks in just after the text widget is verified and modified. And as soon as that happens, notice how it's updating the self.read-only attribute into telephone area code is, and then it's basically parsing the area code out of the number. So this means if I go here and, for example, I change this to 423, immediately the telephone area code becomes 423. That's because of the unmodified text event. And thankfully, because of unidirectional data binding here, automatically, as soon as read-only gets updated from this unmodified text listener, it automatically propagates the change to the text property of the text widget before it. So, I mean, this is a good, complete example of how data binding works. Let's jump into the next text widget. So the next one has a style of wrap and a border. It wraps if text content is too long, like this example. So that's the nice thing about the wrap style. If we were to go to the next one, it has an SWT style of multi with a border. Multi-line enables hitting enter, but does not wrap by default. So that means, for example, if we were to look at the text that is data bound to the multi-variable here, if I were to go back to the top, you can see the multi-variable has a multi-line enables hitting enter, and then a new line over here, but does not wrap by default. So the new line basically is like hitting enter. So that means, for example, if I go here, I can just hit enter again and it wraps again. So that's a nice thing about the multi style. Wrap, on the other hand, will wrap automatically. You do not have to hit enter here. Sometimes you need this, other times you need that one. So that should conclude our lesson of today of hello text as well as bidirectional and unidirectional data binding. If you want to learn about if you want to learn more about the Glimmer DSL for SWT project, check out the GitHub repository.